Hello, my friends. Zodiac signs are often described in words that sound very much like they are extroverted or introverted. It's very, very common. For example, here's an interpretation of Sagittarius that I took from a website. I took this particular interpretation because I think it's very well written, finely nuanced, captures a lot of the essence of what astrologers think a Sagittarius means. Let me read certain sections of this. It's very clearly extroverted. Sagittarians are explorers. Explorer, people going out, seeking things. That's an extroverted trait. The Sagittarius is both a warrior, action, going out there again, more extroverted. They're warriors and poets. They hold a firearm in one hand and a book in the other. Very sensitive language, very clever way of presenting it. I think this is a very beautifully written interpretation. They encapsulate a relentless drive for freedom. I'm emphasizing the word freedom. More extroverted words or extroverted implications. Extroverted meaning going out, expressing yourself, reaching out. They are one of the most magnanimous and worldly signs in the zodiac. Their boundless optimism is infectious. So they're worldly, infectious. You get this gregarious, active feeling in this description. It can be hard for them to find focus, but once they have their mind set on something, they'll stop at nothing to achieve it. And so it goes on and on and on. Insurmountable challenges, a testament to their adaptable strength. They can be overly aspirational. Well, that's clearly extroverted. Sagittarians don't believe in playing it safe. They don't want to play it safe. Very aspiring to a fault sometimes. They're looking for the next great breakthrough. They never look back. The tendency to abandon things before they even get started often leaves them feeling like they never quite get anything done. Beautifully written, extroverted qualities saturating this interpretation. What I'm going to address in this video is to answer the question, is it really true? Are Sagittarians really extroverted? Do we have any solid evidence to support these ideas? Now, Sagittarius happens to be what we call a fire sign. Leo is another fire sign. Again, we get this active feeling from it. They're fire. They're crackling like flames in a wood fire in different ways. Leos are bold, warm, and loving. They're also the ultimate performers. So here we get the idea of extroverted in the sense of being able to express yourself freely in a kind of theatrical way. They can dazzle with the theatrical flair of a Broadway star and the charisma of a politician. They are captivating personalities. No matter how quickly they've just been introduced to a topic, they can speak eloquently about almost anything because they have such a way with words. Very expressive, very dramatic. Leos inject ambition into everything they do. They are ruled by their heart. Their actions are natural and effortless because they are brash, confident, trust their instincts. Again, some reasonably extroverted qualities. I'm going to read you two more interpretations. I'm going to read to you the third fire sign, which is Aries. At their core, Aries do things their own way. They are unafraid of conflict, highly competitive, honest. Again, we're getting a more expressive, outgoing type of energy rather than moving in. After this, I'm going to read to you a water sign. Just the opposite feeling. So Aries throws themselves at the world eagerly and without fear, driven by a desire to prove themselves in their strength. High energy, competitive, ambitious. They naturally take charge because they are good at initiating new projects. They can also be impatient but are naturally active and don't like to waste time. If you're a student of astrology, I think you will agree that these interpretations capture a lot of the essence of what astrologers say about these zodiac signs and this pervasive idea throughout all of astrology. These are the fire signs, the three fire signs, like a trinity of action, movement, dynamism. Contrast that with, I'm only going to read one. I'm not going to go through all 12 signs. I'm just trying to make a point that astrologers emphasize the qualities of the element of the sign. Now let's look at a water sign. These are all from the same website, by the way, just to be consistent. I'll talk more about this particular website later. that I got these interpretations from. Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. Water signs are supposed to be more introverted, quiet. And listen to this. Cancers are homebodies. Wow. What a difference from the fire signs. Drawn to stability, routine, and the comfort of the familiar. They don't like change. Wow. How different is that from the fire signs? Cancers like to know what is expected. They tend to be less experimental than others. So we're getting completely opposite feeling. Traditions in the past captivate their imaginations. Remember it said Sagittarius doesn't look back? Cancer's always looking back, according to these interpretations. Traditions in the past captivate their imaginations. They love art that reminds them of a different time. Old stories and art forms, predictable environments make them feel comfortable. They like to know what's going to happen. They like to feel that they're part of a bigger plan. They don't like surprises. Okay, this interpretation is maybe not exactly the same as all astrologers would give it. Each astrologer has a different little twist, but the basic idea is they're homebodies. They're people at home, staying close to their family, their close friends, tight-knit group, not wanting to go out into the cold, cruel world full of surprises and things that can upset you. So one of the ways we can test astrology is that there are psychological tests that do a very good job at evaluating whether you're introverted or extroverted. So we're going to expect fire signs to be extroverted, water signs to be introverted, and air signs are also considered to be extroverted, maybe not as much as fire, and earth signs also introverted. If this is not true, then all of these fundamental ideas about zodiac signs are wrong. And people have strong opinions about astrology. Some people believe it's total nonsense. Some people live by it. Well, we can evaluate these things. We can find out if they're true. Why just argue from our a priori assumptions and our personal experience? People will say, oh, my brother, my sister, my wife, my husband, my daughter, my child, my father, all these personal experiences. It's called anecdotal evidence. That's not the way we figure things out in modern times. In addition to the anecdotal evidence, we build on that through some controlled research. That research has been done. It's very informative. And there's another reason why this is so important. Who cares whether astrology works or not? Maybe it just seems like some innocent pastime. It's not an innocent pastime. Millions and millions of people are guided by this information, spending millions and millions of dollars every year. So this is big business. This is affecting people's lives. Is it true? And we have answers to whether it's true or not. So just to summarize one thing, and then I'm going to give some data on how big astrology is, how many people are using it. These particular interpretations are from the CoStar website. And CoStar is an app you can install on your Android phone or your iPhone and get all this astrological information. And I think that they are good, not necessarily good that they're true. They're good at explaining what the zodiacs mean according to astrologers. And I'm talking about real astrologers, the astrologers that speak at international conferences, the ones who are members of professional groups, not just the pop astrologer who got the most views on some social media, but the ones who are highly respected, who write the books, who give the lectures, who lead the way, who are part of the professional organizations. I think they will agree that these interpretations are good. I mean, some will say they're great, some will say they're fair. They're fair. Nobody's going to say they're bad. So, is this really true? As I have here in the last sentence on the slide, but are they true, even at the highest level of astrology? Are they true? Well, I recently made a series of 3 videos on research of 940 people who took a personality test. It's called the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire. They took the test. We have their birth data, including times of birth, which they said are from a birth certificate or birth record. We have an accurate time. And what I presented in that research is we were unable to confirm these ideas. Just not able to confirm that fire and air signs are extroverted and earth and water signs are introverted. Other astrology researchers watched those videos. They sent me suggestions, comments, critiques of it, and I'm going to address those comments and those critiques. I'm also going to mention some of the earlier research. Let's dig in even deeper. Let's find out, is there any evidence to support these ideas? This is really important because of the hundreds of millions of people who use astrology. Here's some quotes about this CoStar app. Those interpretations I read are from the people who developed this CoStar app, very nicely written interpretations that they have on their website. Here's some quotes on how many people use this app. CoStar operates a mobile app and online service since 2017. In July 2023, it was reported that the CoStar app has approximately 30 million registered users. Another quote. These are from reliable sources, business analyst type websites and stuff. In 2021, CoStar raised an additional $15 million in new funding. That's in addition to the $6 million they had before. The next quote I have, next website shows that the total investment has been $21 million. Why are investors spending so many millions of dollars? The last website that I reference here, that in March 2024, there were 200,000 downloads in 1 month. So that means you multiply that by 10, 2 million downloads a year. So millions and millions, and they have 30 million registered users. The revenue for the year is only $400,000 because the program is inexpensive, freely available. I say only because when you look at the statistics of how much use there are, this is just one little tiny app among all of the astrologers, all of the websites, all of the discussion groups. So many other applications and uses of astrology, millions and millions and millions of people using, hundreds of millions of people using astrology. I think we have a responsibility to look at whether this is true or not. So, let's go through some of the comments, suggestions, you might say even criticisms of the research I did. I addressed those because I think it's important to really dive deep and find out if there's any truth to these things. And by the way, people come into research with their a priori assumptions. I am an astrologer, but I use an unusual form of astrology, sometimes called vibrational astrology or vibrational cosmobiology, sometimes called cosmic cybernetics, in which we have developed models that actually work with data. We have large databases, we build models, we test them against new data, it actually works. There's a problem, however, for astrology, which is that the stuff we found work, the things that we have found that work, the astrological variables, these planetary positions, have nothing to do with what astrologers normally do when they look at astrology charts. So my view falls in between the cynics of astrology who think this is nonsense and the believers. I'm caught somewhere in the middle because I'm finding, and my colleagues and I, who are using modern research methods to dig into this, we are finding astrology works. So we disagree with the cynics. There isn't astrology works, but we agree with the cynics that we're unable to find support for the common ideas, most of them. So we're falling somewhere in between. The exciting thing is we are marrying modern research methods, modern ways of understanding with an ancient belief system, and it's working. It's just unbelievable. But let's give standard astrology a fair chance. And I'm trying hard to get support for these ideas. So far, not very successfully. So let's dig in deeper and see why I am saying that there's extremely little support, mostly showing that the standard ideas in astrology are just not working. We've got to unravel what's going on here. I know that astrologers, are going to not like what I'm saying, and cynics of astrology may not like what I'm saying, but I've spent 50 years trying to figure this out, along with some other people, and this is exciting that we're coming to a truth where there's people on both ends of the spectrum are a little bit right and a little bit wrong. Let's look at the actual data. It's not me saying it, it's the data, it's the information. Let's look at it. I'm going to address these comments, suggestions, and criticisms from other researchers. Here's one thing that I was told. There's no control group. Well, that's true, and that's a good critique. In the research I did, I ran what's called an ANOVA, also a variation of ANOVA called ANCOVA. To model the data, we have this data. What do I mean by data? 940 people with birth date, birth time, birthplace, and their extraversion-introversion scores on these tests. There's many ways to analyze the data to see what's going on. I used ANOVA and ANCOVA, and I used the Tukey HSD statistics that show that that goes down into each specific zodiac sign. Not only did I test the elements that astrologers believe are related to extroversion, introversion, I tested every planet in every sign combination. Sun in Aries compared to Sun in Leo, to Sun in Taurus, to every combination, Sun, Moon, all the planets, and the ascendant. I was looking for anything and everything I could find using this ANOVA with the details of the ANOVA using the Tukey HSD statistics. If you never heard of these things, it's okay. What I'm trying to tell you is you can watch those other 3 videos, and that's how I modeled the data, and I didn't find any support for the astrological theory. Okay, but that was one way to model data. They're saying, okay, model it with a control group. So I did that. Let's see what happens. And what the other things that I'm saying on this slide here is that a complex ANOVA and ANCOVA analysis that I did does not easily expand to include comparison of control groups. We need to use something besides ANOVA or ANCOVA, and that's what I did. And I consulted with a fellow researcher, Vincent Godbout, who also does astrology researcher. He's a mathematician and astrology researcher. Always in research, it's good to work with peers, to correspond with people. There's so many ways of looking at things. And so I corresponded with Vincent. He came up with a great way to analyze the data with a control group. I love it. And I implemented very closely to what he suggested. Maybe not every little minor detail. I'm using certain software and certain parameters, but very, very closely modeled after what he was considering. I was considering a similar idea, and I implemented it. Here's what I did. 5 steps. I'll go through this quickly. I just want you to know that we are very seriously, thoroughly, and comprehensively digging in to try to understand what astrology is with more than anecdotal evidence. And it's revealing things. It's revealing incredible things. Some astrologers say, oh, you can't get very far with that kind of modern research. Not true. The book I wrote a couple of years ago on the astrology of bipolar disorder, a scientific breakthrough, frankly, it's mind-blowing. There's a form of astrology that actually works incredibly well and can give us a profile for people that are prone to bipolar disorder. We have very high confidence in that model. Now, getting back to this, here's what I did. I took these 940 people and looked at the sign of the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Ascendant. That's 6 points. And gave them a score for fire, score for earth, score for air, score for water. So if you have Sun and Venus and fire signs, you get 2 points. If you have no planets, if you have Mercury is not in, what do I want to say here? If none of these 6 points are in a water sign, you get 0 for water. This was, part of the design that Vincent suggested to test this element theory. Sounds good to me. I did it. And then we divide the 940 people into very roughly thirds. Thirds that are scoring high on extraversion. The score on this test goes from 0 to 24. So around 12 or so is the middle, your average. If you're scoring above about 14, you're extroverted. You're scoring below about 10 or so, you're introverted. So I made cutoff points for the people that scored very low, they're introverts, and about a third there, about a third are extroverts, and the middle third we leave out. Then we can compare the extroverts against the introverts. And we're not just labeling them extroverts. We have a score from 0 to 6. This gives us what we call greater power of the statistics rather than just saying extroverts versus introverts. We're taking into account how many planets are in fire signs and earth, air, and water, and how extroverted they are. So anyway, we do this test. This is the design we use, and we make the control group. This is the thing people suggested, and it's a good suggestion. Sometimes you have to model the data in different ways, many windows into it. So what I did was excellent. There's always more to do. This was a good idea, and I did it. I made what's called a shuffled control group, where we randomly shuffle the birthday, time, and place of the person, and we create this control group. It's what we call a very conservative control group. That means that if we find something, we find a difference between this control group and the actual people, we probably really found something, because the control group is really conservative. It's not biased in any way. Now, step number 4 of these 5 steps, I ran 8 t-tests. What I did is I took the highly extroverted people and compared what we call the experimental group, the actual people, compared the actual people to the control group on fire, that was one test, on earth, on air, and on water. And what I also did is I compared the introverts on the fire, earth, air, water to answer 8 questions. So I'm answering 8 related questions. Do extroverts have more planets in fire? We expect that they do, according to astrology. Do extroverts have more air? We expect a little bit. Do extroverts have more water? And do they have more earth? We expect that they do not. And it would be the same for the introverts. We're expecting the earth and water to score lower. We always expect earth and water to score lower, more introverted, than the fire and air, which are more extroverted, regardless of whether they're highly extroverted or highly introverted. And what we're really expecting is to find a lot of fire and air in the extroverts and a lot of earth and water in the introverts. So I ran this for the total of 8 analyses: fire, earth, air, water for extroverts, fire, earth, air, water for introverts. And I made the control group, the shuffled control group, 3 times, because each time we shuffle, you get slightly different control groups. So I want to test it 3 times. And all 3 times got similar results. That shows that our control group is working, it's fairly stable, and that validates it. What did we find out? So that's the procedure. What did we find out? Here are the findings. Number 1, I ran t-tests. I also ran something called the z-test, which often has higher power and so on. The z-test and the t-test came out virtually identical. In almost all cases, the p-value, the probability from the test, was within 0.01. So a z-test might have said the p-value equals 0.25, and the t-test might say it's 0.24, like 2.5 versus 2.4, almost no difference. So it really doesn't matter which test you run. This is all, you might say, to cover all the bases, all the possibilities, all the possible comments and critiques. And people say, oh, you should use this test instead of that test. We're trying to be very thorough, very careful, very comprehensive. It takes a lot of time to do all this. But I think it's worth it, because there's millions, hundreds of millions of people using astrology. Let's look at it instead of just having a priori assumptions. So you might say I went the extra mile to do these additional tests. I'm actually more excited about going on and doing the vibrational astrology research. But let's go back and be really careful about this. And then I also I combined all 3 control groups together, and so that's an additional test. So I compared against 3 control groups and all of them together. Now here's the results of the 8 comparisons. Here's the first 4. This is for the extroverts. So what I'm showing on this slide is we have the extroverts, that top third people, the most extroverted, the ones who they're asked a question like, would you rather stay home and read a book or go out with friends to a movie? Do you like to go out with friends to a movie instead of stay home and read a book? And they ask it in many different ways so that it, maybe the person has a problem with reading or whatever, or they don't like movies or some idiosyncratic thing about the question. So there's a bunch of questions, and it works. This Eysenck Personality Questionnaire has been used in many different countries, Asian countries, European countries, United States, South American countries. Very consistent findings. They've done test, retest, where you take the test, you take it some number of years later, people get similar scores, some kind of stable characteristics. It's a very well documented and widely used test that has what we call high reliability, high validity, all these kinds of things. Because a lot of people jump and say, well, the test doesn't work. No, the psychologists have ways to figure this stuff out. This is a good test. Now, it will tell us something about whether people are extroverted or introverted. So number one, fire signs. This becomes very interesting. Does it confirm what I found with the ANOVA? What we find out is, whoa, shocking. The fire signs came out slightly more introverted. Wow, crazy, man. Whoa, a little bit worse than random. And here's the p-values, probabilities, for the three control groups. One had 0.06. This is what we call a double-sided test. A lot of the astrology researchers use a two-sided test. A lot of astrology researchers use a one-sided test. It makes it easier to get statistical significance. On a one-sided test, one of these was 0.03. The other was, if you take half of 0.11, that's 0.055. That's right on the border of the 0.05, almost statistically significant. When we use all three together, we get a statistically significant result. Two-sided, p less than 0.04. One-sided, which is what astrologers use, less than 0.02. Using the criteria that other astrologers have used in research, fire is introverted. Whoa. And those are fairly standard criteria, 0.05, 0.01. Wow. Okay. So either fire is introverted or it might be just a random fluctuation. But clearly fire is not extroverted. These 940 people are not extroverted. The people with fire signs. Now what about air? And by the way, they're the means, the average score. The control group was 1.55. The actual people, the experimental group, 1.40. Not a huge difference, but when you have 940 cases, it'll pick up slight differences. So it's picking up that fire signs are consistently a little more introverted than you would expect by random. And, it could be statistically significant. Maybe fire actually does something. Maybe there is some truth to astrology, but it would be backwards from what astrologers say. Well, I think more likely it's just a random fluctuation. I think everybody would agree with that, the astrologers and the cynics. But interestingly, that it showed if there is any truth to this element stuff, fire is actually introverted. Now, I'm already at a half hour. I'm going to stop shortly, and we'll have a part two. And we're going to look at research from other astrologers. An excellent researcher, an astrologer by the name of Robert Curry, and he found some different results. We're going to talk about this. We're going to dig in deep and try to resolve some issues. But I'm just going step by step here. Okay, air signs. Not significant. NS means not significant. Very little difference. And p-value is supposed to be below 0.05. They're nowhere near that. Air is not working. It came out very, very slightly extroverted, but nowhere near significantly. Earth signs, expecting to be introverted. Well, they did come out slightly more introverted, but nowhere near statistical significance. In other words, it's probably random fluctuation. And the same for water, random fluctuations. And the means are almost identical. So for air, earth, and water, we got random results. For fire, we got that they're introverted. Now, let's look at the introverts. That's for the extroverts. If you're an extrovert, of these 940 people, the 1/3, about 300 of them that are extroverts, they tend to not have Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Ascendant in fire. Let's look at the introverts. This gets really weird. I mean, interesting. Weird as in like, whoa, this is interesting. For introverts, so suppose you're an introvert. You're a person, doesn't like to go out to parties and, you like to have just a few close friends, not a lot of, gregarious activity. Do you have these important points in astrology, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Ascendant? In fire signs, no, you don't. So what happens? And we get statistical significance again. So this is a little complex, so let me explain this. Introverts with fire signs are less introverted. Let me explain what's going on. What's happening in this data is that the people with fire signs stay in the middle. The fire signs in this data, I'm not saying it generalizes to other situations, but this is a very good test, so maybe it does. But anyway, in this data, the fire signs is like a preventative that prevents you from getting extremely extroverted or extremely introverted. Keeps you in the middle. The fire signs are clumped in the middle, average. They're not extremely extroverted, they're not extremely introverted. And statistically significant on both ends. So fire signs are, to read from the slide, fire signs are less extreme than the other elements. Fire signs tend to be close to average in their introversion-extroversion trait. This, of course, does not fit with theory, where we expect them to simply be extroverted. What's interesting is that in this data, fire signs are not extroverted. They're also not introverted. They're in the middle. You would almost think this would be something maybe Earth would do, like would just keep you in the middle. I think most people are going to say it's got to be random fluctuation. In any case, the standard ideas of fire do not work. What about air? So for the introverts, most of these are in the wrong direction. And remember, on the previous slide, we also found that air signs, extroverted, they are not significant here. But here they're showing up. The third value, which is random, is also in the wrong direction. Very, very random. Actually showing up more slightly introverted. So air signs look random. Earth signs, they're all in the wrong direction. Not significant, but the introverts with a lot of earth, are not as introverted as the control group. And the water signs are very neutral. The means are almost identical to the control group, nowhere near, just very neutral. So what you end up with, to conclude, what this research shows, is that fire signs avoid being very extroverted, very introverted. Maybe this activity that fire inclines to is a moderated, soft level of activity, not this fired up feeling that astrologers assign to Earth, because the Earth signs are not extroverted and they're not introverted. They just sit in the middle. The other three elements seem to do nothing. As a final conclusion, either fire keeps you in the middle and the other elements are doing almost nothing, or a more consistent conclusion is it just doesn't work. And what I'm going to discuss, among other things in part 2, is that this clumping of signs as fire, earth, air, and water could very well be hiding some effects from specific zodiac signs. One thing we're learning is that this emphasis on fire, earth, air, and water is oversimplifying our understanding of the zodiac signs. That's also what Robert Curry found in his research, is that there's some oversimplification going on when we just say fire is extrovert. The astrologers don't use the word extroverted. That's why I read you right off the website, the words astrologers use are extroverted. So they're not using the word extroverted. Sometimes they do, but it's not that simple. So that's one conclusion that's important for people who want to hold on to these astrology ideas, is at a minimum, this fire, earth, air, water stuff is way exaggerated. We'll get into that more deeply in the next part in the series. I'm at 35 minutes. I like to keep these videos to about a half hour. I'll pick up with part 2, and perfect timing. In part 2, I'll show you another analysis, going extremely comprehensive and thorough, because these findings are controversial. They're upsetting to a lot of people. Some astrologers told me they're upset. Some cynics of astrology told me they're upset. This is what the data says. It's not me. I'm just telling you what the data is saying, and very, very consistently. And I'll refer to other research that also shows that zodiac signs do not work the way astrologers say they do, but they might work in a way a little bit different, or considerably different from what is commonly believed in astrology. Okay, let's stop here. In part 2, I'll show you another analysis that I did in response to the suggestions of other astrology researchers. First thing was to do that control group, and that was interesting. Looking at the data with different ways of modeling the data does reveal different things. Okay, I'll see you in part 2, my friends. Thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.